So here we are, back again for round 3, or should I say part 3 of the interview with Stephen Young. I said round 3 because I have to admit I'm really frustrated with the way that he seems to give contradictory answers, and the way that Detective Morris really doesn't seem to ask very many clarifying questions. It really does seem like the pair of them together just don't communicate well. Now, just a quick update. If you're not familiar with the other cases I'm covering, Jack and Lily Sullivan and Phoebe Bishop, both cases are worth having a look at. I have made a playlist for Jack and Lily. I haven't yet made a playlist for Phoebe Bishop, but I will be doing so, as when I finish this video, I will be making yet another video on Phoebe's case, because there is some rather disturbing information starting to come out with regards to Phoebe's home life, her housemates, and with regards to the search, and so many things. So if you're not familiar with Phoebe's case, Phoebe is a 17-year-old girl from Queensland, Australia, who was supposed to catch a flight from Bundaberg, which is north of Brisbane, down to Brisbane and then across to the other side of the country to Western Australia to spend time with a former boyfriend. She never made it to her flight, and it is believed that she was dropped off in the vicinity of the airport by one of her housemates, and after that, nobody knows what happened. I've dug a little bit more with regards to whether or not she was actually dropped off in that area, and also managed to answer a few other questions regarding that. In terms of Phoebe's home life, it turns out it wasn't quite so perfect, which, if you've seen the images of where she was living, would probably be quite believable. So if you've not looked at Phoebe's case, I do recommend having a look at it. It is quite an interesting case. It is a somewhat disturbing case, and I think there's going to be some more developments coming really soon. And of course, Jack and Lily Sullivan, 6-year-old Lily and 4-year-old Jack, who are missing from Nova Scotia since 2nd of May, having supposedly wandered off into the woods. I have more videos coming out on them. As I've mentioned, I don't do the clickbait stuff. I don't do the rumours. So it'll just be, solid factual stuff. But I do have 2 videos in the works for that, which will be coming out in the next couple of days. And yes, I will apologise. Mouse, my pup, is in a bit of a crazy mood. He wants to play. I've got work to do. Taka and Amira want to sleep. He's not a happy little pup. I will play with him later on, but we've already spent the morning doing other things. So now's the time for me to work and him to sleep. Now, I also, before jumping into the video, I just want to thank those people who are continuing to support my channel with your views, your comments, hitting the like button. You are making a huge difference to my channel. I know that at the moment these interviews that I'm revisiting don't necessarily appeal to everyone, and I have seen that there are fewer people watching these at the moment. I guess some people just like to go for the drama, like to go for the non-factual information, the clickbait titles, and of course the playing other people's content while you sit there and do nothing with your face on the screen, which somehow seems to still get a lot of views. That's not me. That's not what you'll get here on my channel. So for those people who are still supporting me while I'm just doing the boring everyday stuff, thank you very much. I appreciate every one of you. And on that note, I think we can all see how valuable it's been going back through these interviews. I think we are learning a lot more, and we are coming a bit closer to understanding a few more truths with regards to Jenn and Stefan and Maddie and Jenn's stories that she's told to interviewers. By my calculations, we have roughly 39 days till pre-trial begins, and then 50 till trial begins. So I think this is a good way of keeping Maddie's name out there, and also of familiarising ourselves as much as possible with the case, so that we can have some valuable discussions when the trial begins. Now, I'm also going to make a request, and I offer no apology for doing so, and that is, if you are someone who does watch my content regularly and you are not subscribed, it would help me out immensely if you could hit that subscribe button and also hit the notification button so that you get notifications of when I am posting new videos. I know some people believe it to be distasteful to be asking for subscribers, asking people to hit the like button and asking people to hit the notification button, but to be perfectly frank, I am not someone who is in a financial position to do this for free. I know there are some channels out there who are in a position to do so, and who not only push for subscribers, but they also are continually asking for donations of whatever sort. I'm not asking for any of that. I'm just asking for subscribers. It's free for you, and it does help my channel out, and it just does help me to keep getting my channel seen, keep getting my videos seen, and by extension to keep being able to do this. So on that note, let's jump in and continue to look at this interview.
So Maddie makes it back to the house. I'll say condo, townhome, whatever it may be.
Yeah, the unit.
At some point that evening, Sunday evening, Stefan comes home because Jenn asked him to come here to help because she's tired because of the new job.
That's the way I understand it. Yeah.
Have you ever heard of what the dynamic was? There's sleeping arrangements between Jenn, Maddie, or Stefan throughout the years?
I honestly have been trying to figure that out myself. I understood that Maddie slept with Jenn, and they had one room for a while, so my guess is they all slept in the same bed for a little while. I don't know when, how long, or any of that. Like, that's always bothered me. Maddie sleeping not in her own bed, starting elementary school, like, that to me is just like something a kid needs to do to self-soothe and grow to be individual and not have to rely on another person always being there. So that's always bothered me. And I've tried asking Jenn about that over years and trying to encourage her, and it's just an argument. It's just a case that I was like, I'm never going to win, so why am I to keep poking at something?
Honestly, the way that Detective Morris just keeps cutting him off mid-sentence just goes to show how little attention he's actually paying to what's being said here. He's certainly not taking time to actually absorb the answers that he's been given. It's like he's half listening and thinking of his next question instead of actually paying attention to what's being said. And I think that's why he's not following through and following up on things that have been said that are contradictory. And this is another classic example where Stephen has completely contradicted himself again. So Detective Morris asks him what he knows about the sleeping arrangements. And he claims that he's trying to figure all that out himself. And then says, well, my guess is that they all slept in the same bed for a little while. I don't know when or how long or any of that. So here he's saying, well, you know, they only had one room between them at first, so they must have slept together for some time. But I don't know anything more than that. But then what he says after that shows that he actually knows a heck of a lot more. Because he then follows up with, that's always bothered me. Now maybe, if it wasn't for what he said next, you could think that's always bothered me is in terms of that he doesn't know what the sleeping arrangements are, and he'd like to know for Maddie's sake, to know that Maddie's being properly looked after. But he makes it clear what he's talking about, because directly after that, he says that, you know, she was starting elementary school and it bothered him that she was not sleeping in her own bed because she needed to learn to become independent and self-soothe and all that. So he's making it clear that the thing that always bothered him was Maddie not being in her own bed. Okay, because well, yeah, that's what he's just been saying, that he thinks that she slept with them at first when Stefan moved in. But he says it's always bothered him. That means it's an ongoing thing. It's something that has continued throughout the relationship between Jenn and Stefan. It is something that has always bothered him. It's not something that bothered him back then. It's always bothered him, meaning it still was bothering him. It was a long-term thing. Which to me says that he knew that those sleeping arrangements hadn't changed. And in fact, what he says next confirms that. Because he said, I've tried asking Jenn about it over the years and tried to encourage her. He's talking about tried to encourage her to have Maddie in her own bed. Meaning that over the years, the conversation has continued between him and Jenn about Maddie needing her own bed, meaning that he knows that it wasn't just at the beginning, it has continued over the years. And if you're unsure of if that's what he really means, he says, I tried to encourage her. And he starts by saying it's just an argue, and he stops saying argument and instead says it's just a case I'm never going to win, so I'm not going to keep poking. So he's basically acknowledged, first of all, he says he doesn't know what the sleeping arrangements are. He's trying to figure that out for himself. But then he keeps talking, and he basically, you have major leakage here. He admits that he knows that it's continued right up until when Maddie was gone. It's just an argument. It's just a case I'm never going to win, so I'm not going to keep poking. I tried to encourage her. That's always bothered me. These are all things that are referring to ongoing, long-term situations, not to a situation that occurred 7 years ago. You know, it's always bothered me. It's been ongoing. I tried to encourage her, but it's just an argument I'm not going to win. Present tense. Not it was an argument that I couldn't win. It's just an argument I'm not going to win. This is like something that he has probably brought up multiple times based on what he's saying, and that at some point in time he just went, yeah, okay, I'm not going to win this argument, so I'm just going to let it go. He has acknowledged right here that he knew that those sleeping arrangements never changed. Despite what he said at the start, you can tell from his speech that he definitely knew that this is how it was. Maddie was sharing a bed with Jenn and Stefan. He tried to encourage her, but he reached a point where he decided it's an argument he's never going to win. If you say that, you know, telling her Maddie shouldn't sleep in a bed with you and Stefan is an argument you are never going to win, that says the argument still holds. He's not saying that I finally convinced her, I believe I finally convinced her. He's saying she's not going to change the way she does it, so why am I going to bother keeping arguing? Him and Yolanda, exactly the same. They've both told Jenn it's not appropriate. Jenn has pushed back and they've gone, okay, whatever. Let's not worry about Maddie. Let's just not upset Jenn.
I never mentioned to you that, you know, she would need to get some sleep, so Maddie would either sleep in her room or sleep in somebody else's room or anything like that?
That happened during our relationship, but it wasn't another room. It was just like, oh, can we put the kids at my mom's tonight so we could have a night off?
Gotcha. Okay.
Because she would just need, like, we just has time to breathe and need space for the kids. Like, okay, let's see, you know, if we can do that. And we try and let them out, but it was different when I was there. Like, nobody slept in the bed with us unless it was a nightmare. Like, that was my condition. And if she wanted space, then we would coordinate stuff with her family.
Okay, look, I get that this is an interview and not an interrogation, so obviously you are going to handle it differently. But when you are interviewing someone and you ask them a specific question and they actually sidestep and don't answer that question, you should actually come back and ask them the question again. But how many times in this interview already have we heard Stephen go off on a tangent rather than give a direct answer to a question, and Detective Morris hasn't followed up on it? It's happened here again. So he said, did Jenn ever mention she would need to get sleep, so would send Maddie somewhere else to sleep? Stephen does not at any point in time say, yeah, she told me this. All he says is, well, that happened during our relationship, but only that she would send the kids to Yolanda for the night just to have time to, you know, breathe and have some space. But it was different because they didn't sleep with us, unless it was a nightmare. Okay, that's really only half an answer, and it's not answering the question of, did Jenn ever mention to you about Maddie sleeping arrangements when Jenn wanted to check out? But I mean, this again confirms that Jenn did basically just check out and decide she couldn't be bothered being a parent. And it definitely makes it seem like these sleepovers, as she refers to them, were not so much about Maddie and Stefan wanting to watch a movie, but definitely more about Jenn just going, yeah, I want my own space. I don't want to be a mother tonight. I'm just going to send her to sleep with a 37-year-old or, you know, mid-30s man who's not even a biological relative, just so I can have my sleep and not have to think about the fact that I'm a mother and I have a responsibility. Now, here's the thing. I don't recall ever being farmed out as a child to give my parents a break. There were 4 of us when I was a young child. Admittedly, my brothers were 8 and 10 years older than me, so, they moved out much, much earlier, and then it was only my sister and I. But honestly, for a parent to just decide, yeah, I don't want to be a parent tonight, I'm just going to check out and just let someone else take the kid, and I just, forget about the fact that I'm a parent. It just doesn't sit well with me at all. Now, I'm going to point out that there are situations where you have parents who are dealing with raising a child who is high needs. For example, a child who has serious behaviour issues due to some sort of neurological disorder, a child who has ongoing medical issues. That sort of thing can be exhausting. So much so that here in Australia, they have respite carers. People who will basically take on a child for a weekend, and these people, obviously, it's not just randomly taking a child for a weekend. These people get to know the family and become connected with the family, and they will take the child for a weekend to give parents a break because of the high demands of a high needs child. But sure, they're saying that Ash has autism, and Jen's claiming Maddie has ADHD. Now, I don't know with regards to Ash what level things are with her autism, but you don't hear Stephen saying that he sends her off to stay with his mother or something. Maddie, as far as we can tell, was not a high needs child. Sure, she struggled, maybe had the odd argument with Jenn, but kids do that. That's not an excuse to check out and decide you're not going to be a parent. And it certainly isn't an excuse to basically decide to send your child to sleep upstairs with an adult male. I mean, at the base of this, if Jenn is so having so much trouble with being a parent, then the first thing she should have done was to make sure that Maddie had her own room, so that Jenn could go to bed, shut the door, and say, I don't want to speak to anyone till the morning. But instead, what does Jenn do? Keeps Maddie in her room with her, other than when Jenn needs some Jenn time, and then sends Maddie not to have her own room, but to sleep with Stefan. And then, in order to hide the fact that she is a pathetic mother and is guilty of criminal negligence, she not only failed to protect her child, but she put her child in a situation which put her child at risk. And instead of admitting that actually this is all her doing, instead she victim blames her own daughter. Oh, Maddie and Stefan wanted to have a sleepover and I didn't approve of it, and I had a rule for the longest time, but, they were so insistent that I just let it happen. BS, Jen. You willingly, knowingly put your child in that situation to serve your own selfish needs.
To go watch
I don't know what conversations you've had with Ashlyn since this has all happened.
Mm-hmm.
Has Ashlyn confided into?
I've asked her a lot of questions, not try to be too pointed, but hopefully to get some stuff. Asked her, like, did he ever try and spend alone time with you, or try and just, like, hang out with you and Maddie alone when Jenn wasn't around? Did Maddie ever talk about him, specifically? Did she ever say anything positive or negative? But was there at any point in time she wanted to specifically talk about him, like, in any way? Did you ever see a mood change? And so talking about it, and she was like, yeah, like the past couple years, she's been like, they almost like stopped playing games because Maddie was just like destroying her stuff on Minecraft, and it was frustrating my daughter, and she was like, I'm done playing with her. And then I guess like a few months ago, she just started playing nice and started playing better. And so like I'm trying to think about this with the timeline. I'm trying to remember. I was like, is this when Jenn kicked Stefan out of the house?
When was that?
I'm trying to remember when they separated. I'm trying to figure that date. Was that a few months ago? Is that when Maddie started lightening up and started feeling better and stopped being destructive to everybody around her? And did she start feeling like she could push back on this guy, after being gone for a few months, and then this happened? And
So here he's talking about conversations that he's had with his daughter since everything happened to Maddie. And he lists a bunch of questions that he's asked her to do with any experiences in the past relating to when she's had contact with Stefan, when she's been at Jenn's place, and asked about, if Maddie's ever said anything, Maddie's ever divulged anything. First of all, I'm just going to point out that, once again, there were no follow-up questions from Detective Morris. So, did she say any of these things had occurred? What answers did she give you with regards to this? But no, he just goes for what his next question is going to be and really doesn't pay a lot of attention. Now, this bothers me. He's saying that he had asked his daughter about, a changed attitude from Maddie. And he's saying that she told him. He's saying this specifically in relation to, these are questions that he asked her after Maddie was gone. And he asked her about a changed attitude, etc. from Maddie. And he says, and she said that in the past couple of years, Maddie was destroying her stuff on Minecraft, and it got to the point where she wasn't going to play with her anymore. And then a few months ago, she started playing nice, started playing better. Well, it's curious that he's saying that, because didn't he say that he was keeping tabs on Maddie? Partly doing that through his daughter. And yet apparently he's having this conversation after Maddie's gone with regards to Maddie's attitude, not any time beforehand. Supposedly we have the last couple of years where Maddie was being difficult and destroying his daughter's things on Minecraft, and his daughter was at the point where she wasn't going to play with her anymore, And then a few months ago, she started playing nice. She started seeing better. And yet he's only had this conversation now, despite saying that he was keeping an eye on Maddie, keeping an eye on her through his daughter. He's contradicted himself yet again. Essentially, he's saying that his daughter and Maddie were having issues for the last couple of years, and he was oblivious to it. He's saying Maddie had become a little bit obnoxious over the last couple of years, and he was apparently oblivious to it. So, at what stage was he supposedly still keeping tabs on Maddie and making sure things were okay with her? Because if, as he's saying here, he had no idea that Maddie was being destructive with his daughter while playing online, then that doesn't sound like he was keeping tabs on Maddie. Now, he claims that, he wasn't speaking to Jenn and all that. So, how does he know about her and Stefan being broken up, about Stefan having moved out a few months ago? This is only a week after Maddie was gone. It wasn't public knowledge that Stefan hadn't been living there. We all thought, based on the media calling him boyfriend, partner, stepfather, all these things, we all thought that they still lived together. I mean, we were all extremely surprised when we finally found out that actually, no, he hadn't been living there for some time. And yet, Stephen knows this, but then he tries to steer around the fact that he does know this by basically saying, he doesn't know when Jenn kicked Stefan out of the house. Also, not public information. Clearly, there's a lot of conversations that have occurred between him and Jenn about who knows what, and he's trying to hide the fact. He also refers to Maddie being destructive to everybody around her. That's not Maddie being destructive towards his daughter. That's Maddie being destructive towards everybody around her. That, again, suggests conversations with Jenn, when he's claiming that he wasn't really in communication with Jenn anymore. So he's trying to pretend like he knows nothing about what's going on in that house. He's trying to pretend that he had no idea when Jenn and Stefan had broken up. He specifically refers to her kicking Stefan out of the house, which is not public information. So these are bits of information that he has got from Jenn. He's definitely had plenty of conversations with Jenn prior to this interview, and now he's trying to cover up the fact that he's been talking to Jenn by trying to play ignorant. Oh, well, does this change in behaviour? Does this happen to coincide with Jenn kicking Stefan out of the house? Because I don't know. Gee, I happen to know that all these things occurred, but I really don't. Now, just a quick aside, I apologise if I've repeated myself in that last section. My mic cut out, so I had to re-record part of it after a really, really lengthy explanation. And even though I did go back and listen to what I'd already said, I suspect that I have basically repeated myself a few times. So apologies for that.
So that's all Ashlyn said really is
She doesn't remember anything.
in the last couple of months. She just noticed a little bit of a demeanor change.
Yeah. She was playing a little better online, and she was acting a little nicer.
So yeah, there's no follow-up here with regards to the earlier question that Stephen mentioned, anything happened when she was around Maddie and Stefan and stuff like that. No questions with regards to if Maddie had said anything to Ashlyn. All Detective Morris wants to know is, so all she noticed was a demeanour change? It's like he's really not paid attention to what was being said here, and he's missed the opportunity to potentially get some rather crucial information. And meanwhile, can someone explain to me why these children who were closest to Maddie, her cousins, her sister, as Stephen likes to refer to her, how come these were never interviewed? Because they would have to have some really important insights. But as far as we know, no one ever spoke to them.
How did Ashlyn and Maddie communicate?
They text every day.
Like text messages to the phone, Snapchat, IG?
No, my daughter doesn't have Instagram. She has Discord.
What's her name on Discord?
I'd have to look it up. Give me a second. If I have service in here. I'm sure you'll see it on Maddie's as well. She did try and message her after all this just to see if she was online, was able to pop up. So, well, one of the recent hays is from my daughter. I have to download it. Give me a second.
Do you know if anybody else communicated with Maddie through Discord, like Jenn, Stefan, any of Jenn's family or anything like that?
This other boy, Tyler, he's the same age as Ash. They were in second grade together and been friends ever since. I think they've met each other in person maybe a couple times at Ash's birthday parties.
Okay.
But they typically just play online. He lives up in Deltona. But yeah, they've been playing together online for like 3 years now. Minecraft and stuff together. Maddie, Ash, and Tyler.
So again, he doesn't give a direct answer to the question. He's been asked, about Maddie communicating with other people on Discord after him saying that Maddie and Ash were communicating on Discord or texting every day. And the specific question was, do you know if Maddie was communicating with other people, like perhaps Jenn or Stefan? And he doesn't answer if Maddie was communicating with Jenn or Stefan on Discord. He just goes on to talk about a friend of Ash's called Tyler, who was part of the conversation between the three of them. Now, I just want to say something important here. He doesn't know his daughter's Discord account name. He doesn't have Discord downloaded on his phone and has to do so here during this interview. Why is that important? Well, here's the thing. If you go into NCMEC, if you go into any one of the sites that are discussing missing children in America, there is a somewhat disturbing pattern of young females between the age of 15 and 17 going missing. Also, I shouldn't just say young females because we know that that is also a risk with young males as well. But definitely, if you go through somewhere like NCMEC, you will see consistently age 15, age 15, seems to be a really susceptible age. And yet people seem to think that once a teenager is 15, you no longer have to monitor their social media accounts. The thing is, this is a crucial time. This is when they are being catfished by people pretending to be teenage boys. People trying to convince them to meet them. And this is how children get taken and end up being trafficked. And so many departments go, oh, this is a 15-year-old child. She left the house of her own accord. She's a runaway. So I just think it is so important when your child is a minor, even up to 17 years old, it might make you unpopular with them, but you really need to keep tabs on what they are doing on social media. 15, I know some kids would really buck up about it, but with a 15-year-old child, you should still have passwords to their account. And you should periodically be checking their accounts. Now, obviously, teenagers do have hidden accounts that they will communicate with people on. And it seems like as soon as you learn of one hidden account, there's another half a dozen pop up. But those accounts that are visible, those accounts that you know exist, are for the sake of the safety of your child, you should actually be monitoring that. I know 15 can seem very grown up, and a lot of people are like, well, you know, at 15 I have to let them be independent and make their own mistakes and everything. But you can't do that online. 15 is still not mature enough, not worldly enough to understand the dangers that lurk online. So, having just had my little soapbox moment, let's continue.
Has Maddie ever tell you or Ashlyn or anybody that she had a boyfriend or anything like that?
No, and we've talked to Tristan, Tyler's mom, as well, just to see, like, if there's anything he knows or said, but he says, like, I really rarely ever talked to her unless Ash was present. Like, they weren't that close, like, Maddie and Tyler were that close of friends to really talk one-on-one, but, like, anything I've thought of to ask Ash.
Do you know if Stefan uses Discord?
I'm sure he does. I don't know what it is, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did. I know he used Reddit. Wouldn't surprise me if he had multiple accounts and how often he was on it type deal.
Like, I know very limited stuff about Reddit. So I know Reddit is like forums that you can look at stuff or whatever. Any idea, like, what kind of forums he would be part of?
I only know now because his username's been put online, and I've looked through it. I didn't know beforehand.
What's his username?
Give me 1 second, I'll pull it up for you. Yeah, there's some. He's been recently on Ask Teens over the past month. I saw. Sorry, I've had a lot of text messages recently.
That's okay.
That's his username on Reddit. At least his public one. I'm still trying to see if I can have friends find any alternates that he has. Because most consistent Reddit users have at least 2 or 3.
I find it kind of interesting that he delved enough into Stefan's online presence to actually go into Reddit and have a look at basically what pages Stefan had been on recently. And he's even got friends looking into it to see if Stefan had any other Reddit accounts. But when it comes to Discord, he doesn't know. And that would have been easier to find out, because given that he's claiming here that he's asked his daughter 1,000,001 questions, wouldn't it have been one of the questions to ask her? Oh, do you know if Stefan was also on Discord? Did Maddie ever mention it? I mean, maybe he did ask his daughter that, but he's not saying here that he's asked her. He's just saying he doesn't know.
At least in my experience. I'm sure you guys use way more than me, so you guys may know more about that. But
so if that's his username, you can see what forums he's part of.
You can see the ones he's posted in, just like all the places he's made comments and stuff. He has like 6.5 years of history, it looks like. The past month, like it's all like gaming stuff. You can see the progression over time. Like I saw a picture of him 6 years ago at my house playing tabletop games, like a picture of the board that we were playing on, like adult board games and guns, and then Nerf guns and Tamagotchis and just more childish stuff. You can see the way he talks starts to change online. There's more emojis. His gender starts to become more generic and stuff. It's like you can see like there's a warp in the way he acts online over these. It's weird, like seeing this change, and then now it's all. And then like the past month, you can see like ask teens.
Ask teens at porn. Ask teens.
No, it's just like teens could ask questions about life, and there was even one. Where is it? Sorry, I don't know if you guys already looked through this or not. Or I'm sure you guys have another team who probably does all the IT stuff, or I don't know. Yeah, there was one that was a girl was asking about being pregnant and what to do, and he responded on it, and it freaked me the fuck out.
Honestly, that takes some serious dedication to dig that much into Stefan's Reddit account, because if you look at it, he posted a lot. I know at one point I went and had a look, and there was just post after post after post. There's no way I would have been able to dig into it, like going back 6.5 years. But at the same time, I realise that Stephen's a bit of a geek kind of person who probably has the patience to go through that many posts. And of course, you know, he had that direct connection with Maddie, which would of course provide extra motivation to want to check up on what this guy was doing. But, you know, can we acknowledge, even if there was a difference in how Stefan was communicating online, we know that he was a deviant from early days. You know, he had a history of recording people that he shouldn't have been recording. His friend's mother, another friend's girlfriend, and of course more recently Jenn's flatmate. So it's not like he suddenly became the deviant pervert that he became. He's always been like that. So Stephen brought up the post in the Ask Teens Reddit, or subreddit, about with the girl asking about, or saying she believed she was pregnant and asking what she should do, and Stefan commenting on that post. Now, I received flack from a lot of people for the video that I put out, but it was a follow-up from one that Paula did. Paula had looked into that and saw that that post had occurred the day before everything happened. But the post had been deleted. So she didn't go further with that, but I did a video where I basically used the Wayback Machine and dug a bit deeper and found the original post, found the original user, who turned out to have been removed from Reddit or deleted from Reddit. And the interesting thing was that this post did fit with Maddie and Stefan both having meltdowns on the Saturday before Stefan went to Kissimmee. Could be completely unrelated, but it was certainly interesting. I'll see if I can find that particular video and add the link in the description section if you want to have a look.
Like this. I'm pregnant and I don't know what to do. And I'm responding.
Sorry, I gotta zoom in.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
Greatest.
I'll let you read that, Mark.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
When you were with Jenn.
Mm-hmm.
I know you had said back then she wasn't on medication for her mental health, and that was kind of building up.
Yeah, not that I recall her being on meds.
Was Maddie on any medication back then?
No, not that I recall.
No.
I think the only person on meds was my daughter for ADD.
Okay. Do you know if Maddie has ever been on medication?
I don't.
You don't. Okay. Do you know if she's been diagnosed with anything?
I heard she was previously diagnosed with autism, but
Okay.
I thought I also heard she was retested, and they said she only had autistic traits, but is not autistic.
You know when that would have been?
Within the past few years. I think Jenn told me when I talked to her earlier this month in February that's when she told me, I think that's when she told me that she wasn't showing, or she only had traits, and she was no longer diagnosed. It was ADD. Oh, I think she had ADD.
Okay.
And she had to take meds for that.
Okay, first of all, here's the first mention that we have from him of his daughter also having ADHD. So she has a dual diagnosis of ADHD and ASD, Autism Spectrum Disorder, which is something that does seem to become, it seems to be happening far more these days. And I'll come back to talking about that shortly. So he's saying here that neither Jenn nor Maddie were on any medication when he was living with them. So, this is something that has occurred afterwards. And then he starts talking about Maddie and her diagnoses. At first, he's forgotten that she is on medication for ADHD. And then he does remember that and adds that correction. But here's where I need to, I don't know if it's called rant, but I need to vent. First of all, we get this reference to, well, apparently Maddie was considered to possibly have autism, and then she was reassessed in recent years and was said that she only had autistic traits or some autistic traits. Now, this really doesn't say a lot about whoever the psychiatrist was, who, well, had to be a psychiatrist, who made this diagnosis. The reason for that being that there is an overlap in symptoms between ADHD and ASD. So it's a little bit disturbing that a psychologist is not able to recognise the fact that as a child with ADHD, Maddie is going to have some symptoms that appear similar to ASD symptoms. That's really disturbing, because clearly that is what has occurred here. Some psychiatrist, who probably should actually not be registered, has made a vague diagnosis based on just a small number of ASD symptoms and ignored the fact that Maddie had ADHD and that therefore some of those symptoms would have been an overlap. Now, in terms of that, I do believe, and this is just an aside, I believe that there will eventually be a point in time when psychologists actually decide that ADHD and ASD, autism spectrum disorder, are actually the same disorder, but basically, different ends of the same disorder, because there is such an overlap. But that's not my gripe here today, although my gripe is about the fact that a psychiatrist, particularly an American one, and I'll explain why in a minute, would look at just a handful of traits that are autistic traits and say that makes an autistic diagnosis. Now, where am I coming from with this? You may have heard of the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It is, most specifically, the 5th edition, DSM-5, published 2013. Why am I mentioning this? This is the manual that is used not just in the United States, but in other countries such as Australia, the United Kingdom. It is recognised essentially as the Bible of mental disorders. This is what is used when making a diagnosis of ADHD or ASD. It is an American publication, meaning that I would expect American psychiatrists to be at the forefront of knowledge when it comes to ASD and ADHD. This is something that currently American psychologists, they still lead the world in terms of research, studies, etc. So why do we have some quack making a diagnosis of possibly autism? Or actually, no, it's only a few symptoms. Why do we also have 2 minors who would have been diagnosed after 2013 being diagnosed as having ADD? Because ADD does not exist anymore. That is an outdated term. It is only referred to these days as ADHD. There is no he has ADHD or ADHD. There is only the one. But it seems like there seem to be a few psychiatrists in the United States specifically who are lagging behind the rest of the world and still diagnosing ADD. The only times I've ever heard reference to people being diagnosed with ADD in Australia is people who are in their 50s, 60s, etc., who would have been diagnosed specifically with ADD and who hang on to that diagnosis even if they have been told that that is no longer the term for it. But in the United States, it seems that there are some psychologists who just can't drop the ADD thing and are still diagnosing children as having ADD when it no longer exists. That's my little rant. I think that if we have someone referring to it as ADD, it certainly makes me question if they were actually looking for any other possibilities when they were making that diagnosis. I do apologise for my rant, but it just seems ironic that for a profession in a country that is leading the world in terms of research, in terms of studies, in terms of they wrote the damn book, and yet there are still clinicians who are 20 years behind in their knowledge.
Sorry,
I know
there's so many
it's
kids.
overload.
I have so many nieces and nephews and cousins, and it's so many kids to keep track of. I have to call my daughter to see if she remembers, because I know they would talk about the medications.
When
and
you
stuff.
guys were together, you don't specifically remember her being on medication.
Not that I recall, other than like when she was sick type meds.
Right. Okay. How was your and Maddie's relationship? Was she pretty outgoing with you? Was she more reserved?
Was so bubbly. She was. I always describe she was a Sour Patch Kid. She was always a little sour before she was sweet, but you have to get through that little bit of sour with her, that little bit of attitude. Like every picture of her you see, like she was a little hip hop. She was just like, it's always that little she had like this face too. She could stare across her like, what are you doing? Do you have ice cream? I know you have ice cream. Like, she's had this way about her that she could like pierce into you and make you question what you're doing for a second. Like, hold on, what? Okay, I'll share with the kid. You're cute, you know. And she was a brilliant kid, and she was smart in many ways, bullheaded and all the rest.
You know, I don't care if he's trying to say it in an endearing way. I don't like him referring to her as a Sour Patch Kid. Yeah, what he's describing is her having a little bit of sass, a bit of attitude. But when we've heard all this negativity from Jenn about Maddie, it just grates on me to hear someone else referring to her as being a Sour Patch Kid and being bullheaded. You know, he says she's bubbly and she's a brilliant kid. And she's smart in some ways and bullheaded in others. But I don't know, I just feel that this kid has been judged her whole life. And, you know, why couldn't the people around her see all the good qualities in her instead of pulling out the things that to them were bad qualities? Yeah, you could say she was a confident child. She was determined. You know, there's positive ways of describing it instead of calling her a Sour Patch Kid and saying she was bullheaded. It's just an extension of the same things that Jenn was saying. And I am going to point out here that if Maddie was a little bit of a Sour Patch Kid, if she was a little bit bullheaded, it's pretty clear from what he's saying here that from day one, Jenn was a crap parent. That she would check out emotionally and mentally on this child even when she was really young. So that makes it even worse when I hear these negative descriptions of Maddie. Because I would rather think of it as her being resilient, as being determined and confident. And maybe people are going to say, how can you say she's confident when she struggled with anxiety? But, you know, the things we hear make me think that she did have confidence. It's just that the anxiety sometimes knocked that out of her. But we know she was resilient. This child was still smiling in so many photos, despite what she was going through. So why can't the people that were around her notice these strengths instead of wording them in such negative ways?
Did she
I wish. I try. When he first came in the picture for the first like couple years, I remember I asked her all the time because I lived here in Florida. I was like, hey, how is he? How's Stefan? Like, is he treating you nice? Like, is he good to your mom? Like, just want to check on him. And yeah, I can go back if you look at any of those.
Nah, that's fine.
But yeah.
do you know if she was pretty open with your daughter?
I feel like she was. I thought she was. I was hoping that the two of them had each other, so if anything ever happened, then they know they could talk to the other, and then somehow it would get to one of us parents so we could navigate it. Like, that was my goal, was them to be sisters. You know, to have the other person always confide in that's somewhere else. So, you know, like, hey, they're not in the same shit you're in. They can help you get out if something's wrong. And that's what I always wanted them to have. But
Honestly, everything he's saying here screams that he did not trust Stefan. You know, for the first couple of years, he asked her all the time how things were going with Stefan. Why would you need to ask all the time unless you were unsure, unless you had concerns? And then he's asked about, well, you know, was Maddie open with your daughter? And he's like, well, my hope was that the two of them had each other so they could confide in each other. Well, I thought that the hope was that, you know, they could just have someone who was like a sister. But the emphasis here is basically he was hoping that these two had someone to confide in so that if there was a problem, it would get back to one of the adults. Well, are you saying that you didn't feel that you had a good enough relationship with your own child that your child would come to you with a problem? Or is this just another way of saying that he didn't trust Stefan, so he was hoping that by having his daughter keep tabs on Maddie, that if anything was happening, Maddie might just mention it to his daughter? Or on the flip side, is this something that maybe he's been thinking about over the past week after Maddie went and thinking, well, you know, I wish that Maddie had have been able to confide in my daughter like that, and, you know, a bit like Jenn with her sudden supermum moments in her interviews. And maybe on reflection, these are things that he's wishing could have happened, but maybe weren't happening. I'm not sure, but it certainly sounds to me that everything he says points to him really not trusting Stefan. And of course, him not saying it directly says to me that it was more important for him to protect Jenn than to actually speak out for Maddie. Maybe I'm being wrong, maybe I'm being too critical. But I listen to these interviews and I do feel that there's too many people who were standing up for Jenn and not enough people who were speaking out for Maddie.
Have you asked your daughter if she's had these type of conversations with Maddie back then?
I've asked my daughter if, like, semi-pointed questions without being too direct on any of this stuff. Just like, you know, like I said before, like, did Stefan ever try and, you know, hang out with you two one-on-one? Did Maddie ever talk about him specifically? But nothing, like, if I had gotten anything, I would have called you guys. Like, I want anybody responsible for this to have the justice served. No matter who it is, I want them to be taken care of, you know.
So again, he brings up the topic of having discussed Stefan with his daughter, and he says that he asked her semi-pointed questions but not too direct. I can understand, I guess, because she's autism spectrum disorder, that he may want to protect her. But at 15, she probably had a lot of questions. She's probably aware of more than what he realised. So I hope that he's also organised counselling for her. But what he says next is quite revealing for me. He wants anybody that's responsible for this, and then he reiterates anybody responsible for this to have justice served, no matter who it is. I want them to be taken care of. Other than Stefan, there is only one other person that he could possibly be referring to. He's not referring to one of Jenn's flatmates. He's not referring to Yolanda. So why has this come to mind for him? When, according to all the media, Stefan is the person solely responsible for what happened to Maddie. According to what he's been told by the detective, Stefan is solely responsible for what happened to Maddie. And yet, in his mind, there is the possibility that maybe someone else needs to also be held accountable. Saying that he wants anybody who is responsible for this to be dealt with, when it's an established fact that Stefan is the person being prosecuted for it. The way he's talking is definitely like he's talking about more than one person. So what is it that makes him think that Jenn should possibly also be held accountable? Because that is exactly what this means. He cannot be referring to anyone else other than Jenn, no matter who it is. He's not going to say no matter who it is for Stefan, because he couldn't give a rat's about Stefan. He doesn't like Stefan. He certainly never trusted Stefan because he had to keep checking up on Maddie. He could only be referring to Jenn here. And face it, when someone says, no matter who it is, that is that whole proviso of they are referring to someone that is close to them, a friend or a family member. They're referring to something that is so bad that they want to see the person responsible dealt with over it, no matter who that is. You don't say that for a stranger. You don't say that for someone that you don't like and you don't trust. In his mind, Jenn is also responsible for what happened to Maddie. And he wants to see justice served, no matter who it is. What makes him believe that Jenn is responsible? What makes him say this? There's got to be something he knows, something he suspects, that makes him come out with this statement. It's not a statement that you would just randomly come out with. It is a statement from someone who, in their mind, believes that there is a damn good chance that Jennifer Soto also played a role in what happened to Maddie.
Can you describe Jennifer and Maddie's relationship?
They were really close. They were really loving. Jenn sometimes could be distant depending on where she was at with her mental state, but she was always there for Maddie. Sometimes she would, I don't know, check out's the right word, but she just would be an overload, and she would just ask her mom to take care of Maddie. But she really did love Maddie, and she really did care about her and Ash, and really tried to take care of them. At least I thought. I just think she's just had so many mental issues that it caused lapses that caused this. If that makes any sense.
Okay, so kudos to him, because he's the only person that we are aware of who has actually put a share of the blame on Jenn's shoulders. But it took him a while to get there. And while doing so, he was still defending Jenn. He's saying Jenn and Maddie were really close and really loving. Well, that's not something that we've seen. We've heard that they, had major issues. Although maybe it's just Jenn became more checked out in recent years. Because you do see photos of Jenn and Maddie where they seem at least happy. But I can't help feeling that Maddie was almost like a trophy child for Jenn. Just that child to be pulled out to show that, she had this gorgeous daughter who was so very, very cute. And because, face it sounds like everyone adored Maddie. And we see all these posed photos. But where's all the framed photos in the townhouse? Because I don't recall seeing any. Okay, it might be, last year, 2024, when Maddie was unalived. But that doesn't stop you from still having framed images of your children. The ones that are just, the images that are just so perfect that you want to put them up and appreciate them. But there's nothing of that from Jenn. So I have to question how close they really were and how loving Jenn was. And of course, after saying that, he then does go on to say Jenn was sometimes distant. But then he tries to defend her again and says, well, she was always there for Maddie. Well, she wasn't always there for Maddie. That is the problem. She was unaware, supposedly, of what was going on. Or, more likely, she was aware of what was going on and she didn't care because she needed to put her own needs first. But, I don't know who he's trying to convince with that anyway, whether he's trying to convince himself or Detective Morris. Because straight after saying she was always there for Maddie, he then talks about her sometimes checking out when she hits overload and asking Yolanda to take care of Maddie. And it appears that in more recent years, she discovered that she had someone in-house who she could just basically shove Maddie over to and go, here, you look after her now. That's the very opposite of someone being there for their child. And then a few things that he says, which you would think would be a given, that you wouldn't have to say about a parent. She really did love Maddie. She really did care about her. And then he adds his daughter into the picture, and she really tried to take care of them. Notice how many times he's used really here. He's trying to be persuasive. I don't know if he's trying to be persuasive for Detective Morris or for himself, but he's definitely trying to be persuasive. Now, if I were talking about my sister and my niece, I don't think it has ever come out of my mouth, or ever would, that she really does love her daughter. She really does care about her. She really tries to take care of her. Because I know that's a truth. It's not something that needs to be verbalised. Because it's a given. So to hear him having to verbalise it says to me that he is trying to persuade someone of something that is perhaps not entirely truthful. He's not really sure. And he even follows through with that. At least I thought. And that fits perfectly with him using the really with each one of those statements. He is essentially saying here he really doesn't know if Jenn loved Maddie, or if she cared about her, or if she even tried to take care of her. And then he finally comes out with what basically so much of what is said during this interview has been pointing towards. And that is that he thinks that Jenn has had so many mental issues that it caused lapses, and they caused this. In other words, here's the first person who's actually had the balls to hold Jenn accountable and to say that, yeah, she's negligent. She is responsible for what happened. He's being so careful. He's tried really hard to defend Jenn, but it's pretty clear that he can see through all Jenn's BS. And he lived with her. He knew her habit of checking out on Maddie and basically just deciding that she wasn't going to be a parent for a day. And he's recognising that that is clearly what has happened here. She's decided that she's going to check out on Maddie and given Stearns 100% access, and he's taken advantage of it. I mean, she made it so easy for him. Regardless of whether or not she knew, she made it so easy for him. Because she checked out on Maddie. She had those times when she decided, yeah, I'm not going to be a parent today. I'm going to just let someone else deal with Maddie. And because she had Stearns there in the house, she didn't stop and consider the risk to her daughter. Instead, she just handed her over and didn't even think twice about it. So that seems like a good spot to stop for today. There is one more video to go on this. Were I to try and push on, this would be probably close to 3 hours worth. And I have to confess, I started really late today. So this is definitely a good spot for me to stop because it's already heading well into the evening. I think from what I'm seeing so far, I think he's really wrestling here in terms of how much he thinks Jenn is responsible. I think it's quite clear that he never trusted Stefan. He never liked Stefan, and he was concerned about Stefan around Maddie. But I don't think it's really a mic drop moment, him saying she's had so many mental issues that it caused lapses that caused this. I think he's been holding his tongue throughout the interview and trying really hard to defend Jenn. And I think this has just come out as pretty much a natural progression from what he's talking about at this particular moment in time. I think discussing all this throughout this interview has maybe helped him clarify things in his head, or just, saying these things out loud. Maybe he's just reached a point in this interview where he's ready to say, yeah, Jenn really screwed up and it's, she's just as responsible here. And I've said this a few times now, I'm surprised he hasn't been deposed. I mean, that doesn't mean to say he's not been called as a witness, but I would imagine that given how contradictory he's been in this interview, that they would have actually wanted to depose him to have a clear interview moving towards the trial, as opposed to just bringing him in as a witness. Although I guess too, when you look at this interview overall, then there's a lot here that puts a lot of onus on Jenn. So it's possibly not something that the prosecution really, really want. I have to say, it's going to be interesting to see what witnesses they do use in both trials. Now, with all those thoughts out there, I'm going to finish here. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, please, if you are not subscribed to my channel and you like what I'm doing here, please do subscribe. It'll just help me out, help me keep this channel going, help me get more people seeing this channel. And of course, please hit that like button and please leave a comment. So thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.